Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Oliver.
And I'm Vladimir Duchin. Thank you so much for joining us. We are continuing to follow the breaking news from the Supreme Court. Most of President Trump's travel ban on 6 Muslim-majority countries will go into effect.
Today, the Supreme Court announced it will hear the Trump administration's appeal, allowing the president to enforce a limited version of the order as the justices take up the case.
After the announcement came down, we spoke to CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford and began by asking her about parts of the ban that will now be put into effect.
Well, I mean, it is, if you read what the court says is going to be enforced. How it's going to work in practice is not necessarily clear. I mean, what they've done is said, the court today has said, we're going to allow part of the travel ban to go into effect that applies to people from those 6 majority Muslim nations who have no bona fide connection to the United States or any entity in the United States. So that means people who don't have family here, who aren't students, who aren't working here. They can be excluded under this travel ban. That part will go into effect. But if you have a connection here, your mother-in-law wants to come visit you, that kind of thing, and those are the people who had filed suit in some of these cases, it's not going to apply to you at this point. Now, there were 3 dissenting justices, conservatives, who said that's ridiculous and it's not going to work because you're going to have courts trying to figure out and the government trying to argue who is and who isn't a bona fide person with a bona fide connection to the United States. That's their opinion. We'll see how it plays out because the administration actually had argued that the people they were targeting were those with no connection and that they were going to make exceptions for people who did have those connections. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, any way that you look at this is a victory for Donald Trump. And the reason I say that is because he had lost emphatically at every turn in the federal appeals courts. Those courts struck this travel ban down as unconstitutional, religious bias, or in violation of his executive authority under federal law. And instead of refusing to review that or just letting those decisions stand, the Supreme Court not only said, we're going to take a look at this in October, but it also said, we're going to let part of it go into effect. So why that's important, as Justice Thomas pointed out in dissent, is that the court is implicitly saying that they think the president has authority to at least issue part of this travel ban. Again, I mean, that's not anything he's gotten out of any of the federal appeals courts.
Right, and that was the question I was going to have for you, Jan. Essentially, what the court is saying is, as the president and his lawyers have argued, that the president does have, as the commander-in-chief, the ability to enforce the rules, the laws as he sees fit, and in this case, to issue a travel ban to countries that he feels are a direct threat to the United States.
Well, Vlad, I mean, there's no question that the president, has sweeping authority as an executive to make decisions for national security reasons or immigration. I mean, in many ways, these appeals court decisions are completely at odds with Supreme Court precedent. Now, the appeals courts have said, well, that's because there was religious bias, and they pointed to tweets that President Trump had made or statements his campaign officials or associates had made that suggested there was religious bias motivating this travel ban. But if you put that aside, of course the president would have the authority to issue this kind of directive under our constitutional structure. And so that's why I feel like this is, again, it's going to be a major test of a president's power. And if the court says that that's emanated by religious bias, then that will be something else. But the fact that they're letting part of this ban go into effect to do that, I mean, suggests that they at least, certainly he has authority to issue some of this ban.